Grace and peace to you from God our Father and from our Lord Jesus Christ, and welcome to the Ministry Exchange with Dr. Mapson. If you haven't already, I invite you to subscribe so you won't miss any of the episodes released every other Wednesday, along with other updates and insights. Be sure to follow us on social media at Ministry Forward to stay connected. As you already know, this podcast is designed to equip pastors, church leaders, and ministries with authentic dialogue and practical insights for today's ever-changing ministry landscape. And whether you're a seasoned pastor, a new church leader, or somewhere in between, we want you to know that this space is for you. I am delighted today to welcome a longtime friend and colleague in ministry, Bishop Walter Thomas Sr., who is now Pastor Emeritus of the great New Psalmist Baptist Church in Baltimore, Maryland, where a congregation that he led for 50 years and grew the church to over 9,000 members. He is a visionary leader for worship. He is the CEO of Changes Can Happen, coaching pastors and leaders nationwide. Also, he's the former president of the prestigious Hampton University Ministers Conference. He is the presiding prelate of the Kingdom Association of Covenant Pastors and acclaimed author of The Thread Principle and other ministry books. We welcome you, Bishop Thomas. It is very difficult for us during this conversation to call each other
by these
titles. It's been Walter and Jesse for
a long
time. And as a colleague, though, in ministry, I've admired you from the beginning and what you have done and accomplished over the years, and the seasoning not only of your ministry and mine, but of our friendship, which just goes back so far. It's hard to even date it or count the years.
You're like Methuselah. It had no beginning, it has no end.
That's correct. And even when I picked you up this morning, we just jumped right into conversations about. We tell we're getting older when most of our conversation is about yesterday.
Yes. But we're praying for tomorrow.
And praying for tomorrow. Yeah, I was thinking about how we met through our dear friend Dr. Charles Booth. We can never have a conversation 5 minutes without bringing up his name.
Yes.
And I'm gonna come back to him, but our beginning in terms of Hampton University Ministers Conference, and we were in our 20s.
Oh yes, with no money. Eating at the open air market.
Yeah, where they would cook steaks. There were no hotels down there except the Holiday
Inn and Strawberry Banks.
Strawberry Banks by the river, right? And but it was a great. I mean, the conference was of such where we left the conference and couldn't wait for the next year.
Oh, and remember, we would hang out. The conference was smaller because we met in the chapel.
That's right.
Not as many people. But for us, it seemed like it was the tribe of Judah.
Yeah.
We'd hang out all night long.
Yep.
Could barely talk by the third day.
Right.
Because we'd been up all night long.
Yeah.
We were together. We'd stroll in together in the chapel.
In the chapel.
Hard seats.
In those hard seats. A beautiful chapel.
Yes.
Ornate, small chapel. Then we moved to Ogden Hall, and we would sit up in the balcony, and and watch these giants
Yes.
preach and lecture
Never
in
think,
awe. Yeah,
never thinking
yeah,
that we might ever be in the number.
right. Never,
It
never,
never crossed our mind.
never crossed our minds.
And one by one, each one from our ranks
Yeah,
took their opportunity and made their mark.
yeah, yeah. So first it was Wally Smith
Yep.
who lectured on the family because
Yep.
he'd written a book on the black family. So he lectured on the family.
Charles Booth preaching.
Charles Booth,
Those inseparable twins.
the inseparable
Goodness and mercy.
goodness and mercy. And when I went back to New Jersey, I heard that sermon like 25 times.
Well, you know, Hampton did have a borrowing complex.
Yes, yes.
It never felt bad to borrow.
Right, because once you delivered it, it was in the
The public domain. And you knew that when you put it out there.
So I heard the inseparable twins at least 4 times. At least 4 times, and then you were next, and became president when I lectured. I think you
I was in the ascendancy when you left.
Oh, you were in the ascendancy, right?
And you laid them out.
Well, we got we still have the recordings,
The audio
with you in the you're seated in the pulpit.
Yep, that's right.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah.
Oh, doctor, you were vintage. You were vintage. God blessed it so that each one of us could operate in our gift.
Yeah.
And maybe because we had no ambition, God could use it as opportunity.
Right.
Because we never sat there saying, when they're going to pick me.
Never.
I mean,
Didn't want to be. Didn't even think about it. Never.
It ain't cross our mind.
Never dawned. But there was some in the background, I think, who made that happen.
Oh yeah.
You helped make it happen for me, right? But you wouldn't say that, but I know that's the case. But I think it was our turn, but we didn't consider it like my turn. Like I think there's some sense of that today. Like,
yeah,
it's my turn and I deserve this.
See, we all believed another thing that we had, and maybe it's still a part of the fabric of upgrowing persons now, but maybe we're older and we don't see it. We really believed in the authenticity of each other's gifts.
Yeah.
We were all so totally different.
So totally different.
I mean, just the four of us. Booth is a philosophical preacher. Wally is that deep voice that is going to ring through the scholastic halls.
Yeah.
You have the breadth of the Black church experience. You understood the nuances of worship. Me, I don't know what I brought, but I brought something, and I think we all honored and knew that when we got in places of opportunity, we realized we could open the doors for those who we knew brought something to the table.
Right, yeah. But you brought, I think, an authenticity when it comes to preaching to the hearts of people. And sometimes I would just listen to you and say, really, yeah, that's true. That's right. And it resonates with people. And I think your gift, at some point it just seemed like you just took off in ministry in Baltimore. Baltimore's your hometown, pastoring in
Born and bred.
Yeah. And you were not Baptist in real.
I grew up Presbyterian, where we had the confession of faith, the assurance of pardon. We sang the Gloria Patria. Oh yeah, all of that. Ain't nobody hollering, scream. You heard an amen, you went,
Yeah.
Where that's coming from?
Yeah.
We sang we lived blessed quietness, holy quietness. Yes. And I grew up with sermons. I grew up Presbyterian, where we did not grunt, we did not groan. And I grew up where the sermons, Calvinistic in their direction, were geared toward a lofty consideration.
Mm-hmm.
And I always thought lofty consideration is great, but the longer I lived, the more I realized that the gospel message is encroached in story. And each of us lives story. So therefore, the sermon had to charge the mind, but it had to contextualize in where people live.
Right, right. And that's your gift. Where people live, and I think when we all listen to each other, we learn something.
Oh God, yes,
from each other.
yes, yes. And we listened, we learned, we appreciated, and we never compared.
Right, right, right. And
Never
it
compared.
helped us become better preachers,
Yeah,
as colleagues.
and better people.
Yeah, and there was never a sense of competition or rivalry, which Alan Wallace says, he said he knew he was getting old when he started talking about those young preachers. But this I think something to be said of generation where there seems to be a lot of competitiveness with each other as well as with the previous generation.
Well, part of that, I think, Jesse, is the normal ebb and flow of power and the ebb and flow of ambition. 23 years ago, I started a conference in Phoenix of preachers. And I started it because young preachers and old preachers were at war. The young preachers felt like the old preachers were denying them opportunity and credibility. And the old preachers felt like the youngsters didn't show appropriate respect.
Yeah.
So I had fathers and sons in the room and older preachers, younger preachers in the room, and we went through it. And it tickled me 2 years ago, because some of these guys had been with us the whole full sweep of these years. 2 years ago, one of our preachers was talking and and he said, "What bothers me about these young preachers is such and such." And I bust out laughing. He said, "Why are you laughing?" I said, "Because 20 years ago, that's what we were saying about y'all.
Yeah.
And you were saying about us." It's in those days, in the earlier days, it was the little church and the big church.
Right.
Then it became the big church and the mega church.
Right. And the big preacher and the little preacher.
The big preacher and the little preacher, yes.
Which was a fabrication in all of our minds about that, because there is no big little. The same things we don't like our people doing and saying, sometimes in ministry we're guilty of that the jealousy and the big preacher, little preacher, and it hides the humanity of each of us to the point where it hinders relationships, which your conference tries to heal.
Tries to heal.
And I also think, in terms of our traditional conventions, I think it fills a need that.
Oh, yeah.
And maybe at a time when they were at their height, there were different issues, but it was never shifting to the real world and contemporary world. But there were conferences like yours that came up that tried to
heal, because you remember this line, "You got to wait your turn."
Yeah.
Oh God, did we hear that line? You got to wait your turn, and it'd be spoke to you by folk whose turn had passed 5 times ago. You didn't say, "Wait, my turn."
Yeah.
Man, your turn gone.
Yeah.
And then person's inability and unwillingness to let go of something out of fear that there's nothing to grab hold of.
Yeah.
And I think the maturing of life has to be lived within the context of story to realize that the story doesn't end till the story ends.
Yeah.
There's something to be writing all the time.
Yeah.
And even though we may pass from one chapter to the next chapter is just that, a chapter.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's kind of be woven into this conversation is the influence of your mentor. But how you got from Presbyterian Church to
The Baptist
to
Church.
the Baptist Church and to Harold Carter. Just talk a little bit about
A friend of mine who sang on the choir, Daryl Green, he's a preacher in Baltimore.
Yes.
He invited me to go to church with him one Sunday. We didn't have call ID and we didn't have any kind of way of identifying who was calling. So that Sunday morning, I answered the phone. And he said, "You promised to go to church with me this morning." Oh, God. If I'd had call ID, we wouldn't be sitting in this chair. And so my mother decided she wanted to go. I asked my mother if she wanted to go, and she said no, that I was off the hook. But she said yes. I said, "Oh, geez." So we rode up to this church in East Shiloh.
Oh, Fremont Avenue.
Fremont Avenue. Landville. And I had to park in an alley. My new Mustang car in an alley. That did not bode well for my spirit. I walked around to the church, and there were acres of folk in there.
Yep.
I mean, it was jam-packed. I had never seen that many people in church, and I had never seen that many people in church glad to be there.
Yeah.
That was the part that blew my mind. Why are you all glad to be here? Church is a formality and a functionary in life, but you all act like it is an experience to behold. I heard Harold Carter preach, and he preached repentance, the key to life. I've never forgotten the sermon. I'd never heard anything like that in my life. I sat on the side. My mother and I sat on the side. He wasn't scheduled to preach. Cornell Talley was scheduled to preach, but Cornell Talley had broken his arm or injured his arm or something, baptizing somebody the week before, so he couldn't come. So Mary C. Frazier, church clerk, said, "But our pastor, the Reverend Dr. Harold Alfonso Carter, will be preaching today." It was Men's Day. So Dr. Harold Carter preached, and he blew my mind.
Yeah.
I said, I got to come back. And Thanksgiving week was that week. I went back that Thursday. It was equally as baffling to see that many people. What baffled me was not just his preaching, but the effects of his preaching.
Yes.
On the people who were in attendance.
Yes.
I knew nothing of who he was. I mean, somebody said he was with Martin King. So,
Yeah.
What did that mean to me? I'm sitting there listening and watching this response, and understanding it because the sermon is evoking a response.
Yeah.
Not just an intellectual one, but a visceral one. So I go back the next week, the first Sunday in December. By then, I'm sitting on the front row. Then I go back the second Sunday, and I join.
Wow.
And it becomes...
Did you intend to join?
I did when he opened the door to church.
Yeah.
I did. I said, I didn't know what all of that meant because it was so different from
your church. Yeah.
I was at Booth's house one day, and we were listening to a tape, and I was not preaching then or anything. I hadn't been in Shiloh that long. I met Booth through Patricia because Patricia knew Booth. And we had all ridden up to Westchester. Daryl, Brenda, Booth, and Tricia and I rode up to Westchester, and I was downstairs listening to tapes with him, and he was playing a tape for me of Doc preaching at Grace Baptist Church, and we're listening, and they're dying like flies. And he says, this is when Vaughn was candidating for Grace. And I'm sitting there, my father had always said, my mother too, Never open your mouth and let folk know you're stupid. So I sat there saying, candidating for grace. I thought grace was a free gift. Free gift from God. I didn't think you had to candidate for it. How do you candidate for grace? And Vaughn, and then he said, Dad, don't you hear him? Ah! I said, that's how you candidate for. I said, well, I got grace in the Presbyterian church. I don't know if I want this grace in the Baptist church. And it was going on. I'm talking about Vaughn candidating for grace. And then he says, and then he became the pastor when they called him. And I went, oh, that must be how Baptists get a church. They candidate for a church. Listening to Harold Carter over those years, though, was so different from listening to Calvinistic preaching. Doc might not think so. He was a Christologist. Whenever you heard Harold Carter, you were going to hear Christologist.
Yes.
But he crouched it in the historical context of the text so that you're hearing story. I don't know if he would consider himself a storyteller, but I considered the gospel that I heard from him to be a gospel that came roaring out of the scriptural story. I think of Honey on the Ground and
Yeah.
They were so contextual. So listening to him made me ask questions of the human context in which I lived and in which people live. When I write sermons, I see people.
Yeah. Right.
And so Doc gave me a love for letting the scripture, letting the story tell the story. Whatever the story of truth is that you're trying to present, let the story tell the story. Sam Proctor helped me with the dialectic in the sense of find the tension in people.
Right.
Sometimes spoken, sometimes unspoken, and raise it before them. Walter Brueggemann says, articulate the pain that people feel, that they can't find words to say.
Yeah.
And to me, that comes out of the tension of the text, the tension of the truth that I'm living, and the truth that faith is trying to tell me.
Yeah. And I think when you go back to Harold Carter's, one of the things I believe is that when we preach, there are other voices that are speaking through us that influenced us. So when you talk about Harold Carter's from Selma,
Alabama.
The the deep South.
Thinking of the wine.
Yeah, and it was raised in that
crucible.
Yes, where the Bible came alive in stories and imagination and preachers' imaginations, and he came up with that. Every time he preached, it was like he was preaching in revival. It was always about, it's like, oh yeah, we must be saved. We gotta be. I mean, because we tend to lose that in the seminary experience in life in terms of preaching to save people. He wanted people to be saved, Doc. And
I think in a sense, all of us do, but we're in different categories. For example, high schools and colleges and even professional have sports. That's the general title, sports. But you got baseball, football, volleyball, you got tennis, you got golf, you got hockey, you got all these different ones. But it is sport. I think all of us are under the rubric of Christian preacher. Harold Carter was a Christologist. I mean, if you hear him preach on anything, he coming down the street, Jesus saves to the utmost. Jesus saves
to the utmost. Jesus.
If you were to hear F.D. Washington, you're gonna hear doctrine. or like Winfield Showell in Baltimore. You're going to hear doctrine. You're going to hear that doctrinal voice ringing like a bell. And he coming down at the end of the track, you need the Lord.
Yeah.
The doctrine is bringing the Son of God made flesh is Harold Carter.
Mm-hmm.
The truth that the Son of Man presents is the doctrinal preacher.
Mm-hmm.
If you listen to Samuel Proctor, you're going to hear the tension that man is living with that can only be resolved in the proposition that he's putting forward, that Jesus is the answer to everything that's going on. So what I saw with all the people that he would bring through Shiloh, and with my own individual wrestling, was that we were all playing sports, but we were all playing a different game in the sport, but the aim was the stands.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's basketball, football, golf, or whatever, you playing for the audience.
Mm.
Wherefore we are encompassed by so great a cloud of witnesses. You playing for the audience. Like when you hear James Perkins,
Yeah.
you're going to hear the literary, when you hear Gardner Taylor, you're going to hear the prince of language and the sense of this boundless historical figure who can speak in Shakespearean language to folk who speak Ebonics,
Mm-hmm.
and yet understand it. But he coming at the end of it, you're gonna know you need his Jesus.
Mm.
And I think that was something I had to learn, because you had mentors, I had mentors. If you're not careful, you try to become them.
Yeah.
And it is only discovering the sport you play that begins to differentiate you from them.
Yeah.
But at the same time, wed you to them.
Yeah.
Like Doc, I gained so much from. I would tell anybody, the thing I miss the most from pastoring is not preaching. It's leading worship.
Mm.
Oh, I miss leading.
Well, Harold Carter was the consummate worship leader. I mean,
You see what I'm saying?
And that is in you, and in Charles Booth.
You see where I'm going?
He never finished a sermon without an altar call.
Oh,
because prayer, the prayer tradition of black people was
Doc
his
gonna pray.
Amen. He's going to pray in an airport.
Hello.
If he sees you in an airport, he's going
Let's have a word of
prayer. He came to Jersey City to preach at Salem Revival. So I went over to his hotel, got him, went to lunch. He wanted to see my church. Elizabeth took him over there. We're in the pulpit. He prayed
prayer.
He prays for me in the pulpit. He believed it.
Oh, he lived it.
And you believed it because
he believed it.
Yes, absolutely.
And you saw it evidence. You saw the fruit that grew on that tree.
Yeah.
I mean, I developed a sense of the worship service.
Yeah.
I'll go to churches now and I'll see the pastor just get up and give remarks, just that in the announcement section.
Yeah.
And maybe the offering appeal, and then go straight to the sermon. 50 years, I never did that.
Mm-hmm.
50 years, I'm setting the tone.
Yep.
With everything going on. I'm telling the musicians, we don't have spots when y'all ain't playing. Mm-hmm. I need those interludes and improvisations and all through the service. I need you to play what comes through your spirit so that it might resonate with mine, or what comes through my spirit, you can grab it and go forward with it. I learned that. I learned the genius of that.
Yep.
Sitting there in the 1970 worship.
Right.
Of course, we don't do worship like that now.
Right.
But in the 1970 worship, the framework was laid in me that continued to morph and grow
Yeah.
through the years.
Yeah. Well, I contend that the pastor is worship leader.
Chief worship leader.
Absolutely.
And doesn't abdicate that role.
Right.
And you know, I hear preachers will say, well, I haven't met with my musicians. Now I don't. How do you not meet with the musicians and they have no clue of what you're preaching? You got an A service and they got a B service.
Yeah. No,
y'all got to be on the same page.
Yeah. But that's traced to Harold Carter in terms of great. In fact, the great line with he and Bill Jones was, well, Carter would say about Jones, said your preaching ain't gonna save nobody, and Jones would say about his preaching, well, he's a great worship leader.
Yes.
Not a great preacher.
No, he's
a great worship. But they did that playfully. They were best of friends. But that goes back again to the gifts and your analogy about the sports. And we, and originally the four of us playing different sports but all for the same.
Could none of us sit on the organ and play like you?
Well, you could.
Oh no. It'd be no.
We used to in the old church.
Yeah, I could play some stuff, but I couldn't play like
we would sit there and that organ.
Yes,
the organ was in false.
Yes.
If I recall, was in.
That's it. That's where it was.
Right.
Yes, that's where it was. I could play some. I could play stuff I know. You could play anything.
No, I can't play anything.
Yes, it's a little bit you can't
I
play.
can get through a hymn. That's about it.
I'm glad. I'm glad you think so sparingly about yourself.
Well, yeah, but
when most of us understood how enormous your gift was.
But the music, though, that helped us to be more aware of not only the place of music in worship, but worship itself.
But we were also all out of a new musical era where in the midst of the civil rights experience and in the midst of everything Black folk were dealing with, it had the scent of gospel music in this regard. We grew up knowing life was tough, but all of our music made us happy.
Yeah.
Even if they sang tough songs. Keep on pushing. Can't stop now.
Yeah.
Curtis Mayfield and the Impression.
Yeah.
Move up a little higher.
Yeah.
Remember? Our music.
Nothing but church.
And it was hopeful. Even in the midst of our struggling reality as Black people in America, the music we sang, Temptations, Four Tops, the Dells, Martha and the Vandellas, Patti LaBelle, the Supremes. I mean, whoever it was, Smokey Robinson and the Miracles, you moving and you gyrating.
Yeah.
Gospel music that then began to take on the sound that didn't have just the Southern tinge, but the urban tinge.
Yeah.
And I guess that's why I like choir music now, gospel choir music, more so than, say, I like CCM and all that stuff, but gospel Black choir music is what I really love because it speaks to the pain that we live through, but it speaks it in a triumphalism that we're going to always triumph.
Yeah.
We can be happy, not happy in what we're facing, but happy because this ain't going to be a negative ending.
Right.
And what all of us brought to music, I think of Booth, worship leader, yourself, worship leader, me, worship leader, Wally in his own right, worship leader, Levi, worship leader. All of us understood that music has a way of setting the table. And the worship has a way of setting the table for the meal we come in with this word.
Yeah. And the old country preacher, who helped set that table but the amen corner? The sisters who would start moaning,
doctor.
And if you didn't know what that was, you would say, "Oh, that's disrespectful." But the the Amen Corner, the women were helping the preacher find his tune.
And the interesting thing, that moan that sounded so pathetic, had a way at the same time of ending with such a crescendo.
Always, always.
And that was when we started preaching, that was the miracle of our services, that they crescendoed. Dr. Evans Crawford would say, your sermon should always end on the indicative mood.
Yep.
It should always end with this from to.
Yeah. And he talked about homiletical musicality.
Yes.
Terms
that we don't even use
right.
anymore.
And Harold Carter had music in his voice, as you right. He wasn't a hooper.
One morning,
but
he's a tuner.
He was a tuner, and there was music in his voice when he got up to say good morning.
Good morning.
I mean, it was just.
But don't let him come down that last stripe.
All of that is Southern. When he would come down and finish, like I used to go where my dad's from Alabama, so there's so many connections that Alabama, Selma University, Carter's dad taught at Selma. My father went to Selma, knew his father, so he would have Carter come to Newark in revivals, Doc, and
in his heyday.
Yes, packed. And Harold Carter would
preach,
that music in his
and
voice.
He'd come down to that end.
And people were there.
I don't care.
Yeah.
And then he'd hit, and soon one morning, I saw him start at one side of the church and go all the way across to the other, because he was musical anyhow, and hold that note. And I watched them die. How'd they die? They died like this. Bam, 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 bam. All across the floor.
Yeah.
All across the floor.
Yeah. And so again, the conversation gets back to Booth too. And it's interesting, I think, that we all call each other by our first name, but we call Booth. I never called him Charles.
Me neither.
I don't know why.
Me neither. I never called him.
It was always Booth.
Booth.
Just Booth.
Wait a minute. Booth.
Yeah,
anybody go Booth?
I had a member of
Booth.
Booth ran our revival in Elizabeth for like 12 years, right? Like 12 years. And one of the ladies there was always calling, hey, from Booth.
Booth, doctor. That's Booth.
Yeah. But we met when he came to Crozer. The last year I had started pastoring in Elizabeth. Levi Baldwin kept telling me I got to meet
Booth.
He was telling Booth he had to meet me. Finally, we got to meet, and that was the meeting. And then we went to Hampton together. 2 cars, Wally Smith and Booth rode in a car. Me and Levi rode in my.
Did you drive? Because you always had the latest and the greatest.
Yeah, I drove.
Yeah, you had the latest, and I remember when I got my Park Avenue, because you had a Park.
I had a flat tire on the way down, but at the same.
I think I met all
13.
I met all of y'all at a cookout. I still got the picture at.
You know what? You're right.
All y'all at a cookout. I remember that, boy.
Yeah. The Booth came. I've been pastoring a year. We all started pastoring about the same time. I was 1969. Levi was 70. Booth maybe was 70, 71.
71 or 72. 71. Because I started.
You came along
73 and pastored 75.
Yeah, you were the baby.
I was the youngster.
Levi was the oldest. You were the baby, right? But he came to
Levi Benjamin Baldwin.
Yeah,
the guy called his whole name.
Levi Benjamin Baldwin. Booth came, did our men's day, preached the drama of deliverance.
I want to talk about.
No, that was 70.
Drama.
That was 1970.
I remember 1975 alternatives to this. I want to talk about alternatives to this band.
Great voice.
That booming, deep voice.
Yeah. But again, the influence, Harold Carter. So he preceded you as Harold Carter's assistant.
He came from Enon and
Right.
Dr. Carter asked if he could come join him at New Shiloh.
Mm-hmm.
And he went to New Shiloh to work with Dr. Carter and the Neighborhood Youth Hour and other programs. And when we left Howard, he went on because I think Doc recommended him for St. Paul Church.
Yes.
Yeah, for
And,
St.
and
Paul.
remember, Amos Brown
was there.
And Booth followed Amos.
Amos, yep.
And Amos sold Booth his Volkswagen.
That little Volkswagen, yeah.
That was Amos Brown's Volkswagen that he's and then Booth, the first car was it a Cutlass or
Yeah, the Cutlass Salon.
Cutlass, yeah.
Remember that with the open top that you could look at the panels, you could look at white interior, white interior. I went and bought a Cutlass Salon. I was following in my big brother's footsteps.
Yeah.
Then when I rode in your car, I went and got Park Avenue. I followed in your footsteps. But Booth was an unusually gifted soul.
Yes.
Now, both of us are cut from the Harold Carter mold.
You are.
But we play different sports.
Yeah.
Harold Carter plays Christology. Booth, you're going to hear undeniably the social struggle and the God of the people who are struggling. How God the word of the Lord for the people who are struggling in the social environment of oppression.
Yeah.
That's Charles Booth.
That's Charles Booth.
That's Charles Booth. And I remember when he died, one of the hardest moments for me. Yeah, I was blessed to be asked by his wife to do his eulogy. His wife was unbelievable in his passing.
Yes.
And, I mean, she stood by his side.
Yes, she did.
If it wasn't for her, he'd have been dead long before he died.
I believe that.
Long before he died.
I believe that.
She asked me if I'd do the eulogy. And I said yes. And that meant really getting ready to do this eulogy. So I never had time to grieve his
Let me say this. There was nobody else who could have done that but you. The two of you were the best of best. I mean, he had a lot of friends, and because he made everybody feel like you were his friend, but you were his best friend. And Booth and I talked, regularly, but the conversation always came to you in the conversation. So I knew there was nobody that.
But you and I have been pastoring long enough to know what you'll never take that for granted.
No, you can't.
No,
you can't.
She asked me. She called me and she said, "Would you do the eulogy?" I was so honored. I could have run through my wall because I knew all the people Booth knew.
Yeah.
And I knew the caliber of preachers. And I think all of us don't put ourselves in the category with anybody else.
Right.
And so I was beyond honored.
Yeah.
But I didn't have any chance to grieve.
No. No.
It was, and after it was all over, I was out walking as I did every day because COVID came the next year. But I was out walking one day. I said, God, I don't understand it. Booth preached social justice, and he preached against injustice.
Mm-hmm.
And he's dead, and nothing has changed.
Yeah.
The world is still the same cesspool it was the day. Is this all we have to look forward to? We preach making noise in a wilderness. Are we just crying to the darkness? I said he preached hard all his life on this theme, and we about to wind up with a nut for a president.
Yeah.
And the Lord helped me. He said, I didn't call Booth to change the world. He said, you're wrong.
Mm.
You think I called him and his preaching to change the world? He said, I didn't call you and yours to change the world.
Mm.
I called you to just move the needle.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
Just move the needle.
Yeah.
Person who picks up after you
Yeah.
will move the needle a little further.
Yeah.
So that's all you. He said, don't deceive yourself.
Right. Yeah.
You only called to move the needle, and he moved
He did.
the needle.
He offered hope for people.
Yes.
He would come night after night, Doc. Now, he could roll it for an hour.
Well, I do know. I do know. I do know. He rolled my.
He rolled it for an hour.
Bible in our church all them years. We do know.
Right.
We would always say we get out depending on what time we put him up.
Right. Right. And
Yeah.
they go home at 10, 11 o'clock
Jesus.
and come back the next night.
And did he care? Did he care? Absolutely not.
And he'd sleep until
12 o'clock.
Yeah.
Pick me up at 11:30.
He never stayed in the hotel when he preached for me. He stayed in the parsonage, and we'd come back and stay up half the night.
Stay up half the night. When somebody gonna bring food back? Because he got to eat. He gonna eat one plate.
Yeah.
One plate. He ain't never gonna eat two, because he's a restaurant eater.
Yeah.
And they only serve you one plate in the restaurant. So he's gonna eat one plate.
Yeah.
Well, I remember that the Lord said, I didn't call him to change the world. So don't get it twisted. Ain't none of y'all gonna change the world. You just called to move the needle.
Move the needle. And he made people feel, when he preached, people felt better.
Yeah. You think of the Kevin Newtons, the Kevin Dudleys, the Donnie Fitzgeralds, the Victor Davises. He moved the needle. All of the young preachers that he helped with their work and help them to become and move up the ladders. He just moved the needle. When it's all said and done, Jesse, when we close our eyes and we meet God, the only thing God has for us is a future. And the only thing left for us is to be remembered for the needle we move. The people who say what our ministry did to bless their lives and how they continued it in the lives of others.
Right. Right.
And Booth moved the needle.
I sat next to you at the funeral because I did one of the scriptures, and I'm saying to myself, man, how was he going to do this? Because all of us knew how close the two of you were. I mean, nobody else would have accepted the assignment had you not been. Well, I'm not doing that. That's for Walter S. Thomas to do.
Did I do all right that day?
Yeah, you did, and you handled it well. You spoke for the preachers. You spoke for us in that eulogy. But I'm telling you, that death, I'm still like, I can't call him again. And again, every time we talk, anytime we talk,
coming to him,
we got to go to him.
The African proverb says, you're not really dead as long as you're remembered. And we keep Booth alive. Part of what grieved me after he died was I didn't sense anybody was talking about him. The few of us, but I didn't sense there was great conversation. And that bothered me. I said, Lord, you just died. I've forgotten now. Yeah. But then the Lord said, no, you're remembered by those who knew you.
Yeah. I remember when he called me to tell me about the cancer he had.
Oh, God.
I'm saying, what do I say? I don't know what to say.
Did he tell you what I said?
No.
It's a wonder. He called me. I'm sitting on the back porch reading the book, The Shack. And Booth calls and says, because I'm the one who told him to go doctor. He was feeling bad and he wasn't getting better. I said, no, you need to go to the doctor and have because I'm a certified quack. I said, you need to have them dig deeper into this because they're not getting this. Because he had called me and said, I got to fly back from California. My voice now, I said, take 2 Anderson 4 times a day, across the country, and your voice be fine. But then the next week, it was something else. I said, no, you need to go doctor. Something is wrong. something is wrong. And Dr. Hicks, who was his
Yeah.
physician, who did such great care on him, said, I'm going to barrel down on this. And he barreled down, and I'm sitting on the back porch, and Booth says, they say I have multiple myeloma.
Yeah.
I sat up. I said, you got what? Multiple myeloma. I said, okay. I had a passing knowledge of it, and it was not favorable.
I said,
said,
this is not good.
This story doesn't end well. So I went online and started reading stuff. I said, oh, Jesus. So I called one of my doctor friends. I said, Dr. Jerry, I need you to talk to me about multiple myeloma. One of my friends, and she said, oh, Pastor, this one doesn't normally end well. I called Booth back. I said, Booth, whatever you do, don't go on the internet and check nothing. If you got a question, call me. I get you the answer, but don't you check nothing out.
Yeah.
And we all watched him endure that journey.
Yeah.
With in his own inimical style, not changing a bit of who he was. Fussing, mad, contentious.
Yep.
But all of that as a defense mechanism to try to keep on going.
Yeah.
And steadily,
And he kept going. I mean, he was at Progressive Convention met in Philly that year. He was there.
He was there. I was here with him.
Right.
We
went and got cheesesteaks.
Yeah, remember, I ain't forgot.
We got cheesesteaks.
We paid. I remember calling him and said, I'm not.
And Doug Banks,
Doug Banks.
with his son in the ministry, still loves him.
I called him and said, I'm not going to have you do all 3 nights this year. What are you talking about? I said, no, you're going to do 2. I said, you can do the first and third or the first and second, but you're not doing 3. I said, you can take the third and rest here and whatever. I said, but you're not doing 3. I said, if you want to kill yourself, you have to do it by yourself. I am not joining you. I said, I'm not going to participate in this. You're going to do 2. I can handle 3. I said, then that means you'll do well with 2. But you're not going to do 3. Because he had gotten really sick before that. And then it went to one night. I remember the last time he preached for us.
One night, yeah.
Yeah, doctor. Oh, I remember the week he died.
Yeah.
There's some memories, I think, that become that become coffee table books. And that's one for me.
Mm-hmm.
If I sit at the table, if I sit at that coffee table, I'm going to see that book. That whole week. Tricia and I flew out there. His wife called me on Friday and said, what's your plans for the weekend or next week? I said, nothing pretty clear. She said, I think you need to come see your friend. I was at the driveway of the church, backing out of the garage. And I knew what it meant. And I couldn't get a plane for the weekend. There were no planes. Every plane was booked solid. I couldn't get a plane. So I said, Tricia, we're going to fly out Monday morning. We flew out Monday morning, got there early, 8 o'clock, got to the hospital. And they were talking about stepping him down out of intensive care. So I said, he must be better. He must be doing better. And Crystal said, yeah, they're talking about, she said, but they got a little infection they want to treat before they do that. I said, okay. And we had gone around about that infection. So we talked, we stayed all day long. And he and I sat in the room and we talked. He dressed in towels looking like Mahatma Gandhi. And we just talked all day long. And then came time to leave. And he said these words to me as I was leaving. Last thing he said to me, his last word, when do you think I'm getting out of here? I said, well, they were going to move you today, step you down out of intensive care. So I would say they're going to probably move you tomorrow. So you may be home by Wednesday. We left, caught the plane, went home. Wonderful visit. I said, he's doing good. He's going to come back from this. An hour after being home, his wife called and said he done gone to a place we cannot get him back from. The next day she called and said it's worse. And Wednesday, she called and said they give me an option. I can take him home or I can leave him here. I'm standing in the closet of my church getting ready to go down for initial sermons. And she says, I can take you. I said, what do you want to do? She said, I want to take him home. I said, then call all his friends that are local.
Local, yeah.
And tell them to come to the hospital before you take him home. Because when you take him home, he belongs to you.
Right. Yeah.
So she took him home, and the rest was history.
Yeah. Yeah, that.
But he was our prince. Gardner
but-
Taylor was the
and he.
prince of preachers for the older age, but he was our prince.
Yeah, it was rolling when they rolled him out of the church after the funeral from the door to the hearses. That's when it got me that he's gone. Up until then, you're like, but that was I said
Like when they put him up in the air and put that thing of sealing that thing up.
Yeah,
That's when I said,
I didn't go to that.
Oh, doctor, it got you where it got you. That's why you didn't go. It didn't get me there. It got me there. That's why I couldn't go nowhere after that.
Yeah.
Because then I knew, as White Walker says at the end of Malcolm X, the man you knew as Malcolm X is no more.
Yeah.
The man we knew.
Yeah. And I also said, this probably be the last time I see Mount Olivet again.
Yes, yeah, that was. Yeah, we all said that.
Because of the transitions in life. And for over 85 years, they've served families in the Philadelphia area with care, compassion, and consistency. Under the leadership of Gregory T. Burrell, Terry Funeral Home has become a trusted name, offering guidance and support when it's needed the most. So whether you're facing the difficult task of planning ahead or navigating the grief of a recent loss, Terry Funeral Home provides the kind of support that eases the burden with dignity, clarity, and compassion when families need it the most. To find out how they can serve your family with care and confidence, visit terryfuneralhome.com. And thank you. And Pastor,
And we've seen enough.
Yeah, and I think that's brings us to again the old way of transitions of preachers either dying, nothing's in place, may have worked at one time, and may not have, given. Marvin McMickle was here not long ago, and I watched him on the live stream. He said it was right during the time when the Pope had died, and Marvin McMickle said that when the Pope dies, they're going to have his funeral. They're going to mourn. Was it 9 days? They're going to come together, and more than likely in 2 days,
they're going to elect a new
Pope to serve 1.4 billion Catholics in the world. He said it takes a Black Baptist Church 2 years.
2 years, doctor.
With 50 members.
50 members.
To call.
And wait a minute, then somebody who voted for you won't put you out in the next year.
Yeah.
Your chief sponsors.
Yeah, and I think I'm seeing more of it now. First of all, our pastors of our generation have packages with benefits that my dad and his
generation
didn't have,
No.
right?
Well, see, the workers in those days didn't have
it either.
There's certain benefits that a corporate reality bring to pastoral packages and the like. But then there is a sense of the uniqueness of the church that the pastor has to always be mindful when succession time rolls around.
Right. And our friend Booth didn't get a chance to put a process. Obviously, he didn't think he was going to die. But just in terms of your retirement, and in terms of putting a process in place, which I think is a responsibility of leadership. to have a process in place so that churches don't have to fight in the politics, the power, and some J. Price Barber, who was Harold Carter's mentor and mine and Booth's, you know, he would talk about the calling of a Black Baptist preacher is the most ungodly process.
I'm glad you bring that up. When I thought about my own departure, the metaphor I would use is a song that the Four Tops sang, like a bridge over troubled waters. What are the troubled waters that we're building this bridge over? We're building them over a people who will be left wondering if something happens to you. Leadership, there's something always rises to fill the vacuum of leadership. But that something that always rises to fill the vacuum of leadership isn't always leadership.
Yeah.
And what I knew was that the waters would be troubled if I died. Just by the nature of what happens. I've seen it too many times, and I understand it too much.
Somebody has to fill the vacuum
The vacuum.
that may have been laying in wait
anyway. And then you've got those that feel we should have been headed in another direction.
Right.
And you've got those who have who have no clue what pastoral ministry is.
Yeah.
But think they can direct how it should be done. They have no clue what it's going to be done, how to do it. They're not just coaches on the side who coach a sport they never played. They have no clue what it takes to play the sport.
Right.
You want to call a pastor and a preacher, you don't even know what it takes to write a sermon.
And you had committees that think they're calling a CEO.
Yeah.
Not a pastor.
Well, even in that regard, they don't even know what the pastoral responsibilities are on the business side of the church.
There you go.
That you got to compete with.
Right.
You've got to fix your plant, but at the same time, you've got to put in ministry programs. You don't have enough staff to do what has to be done. You don't have anyone else helping you raise the money except you, and everybody else wants to tell you how to spend the money you raise. Nobody gave because they liked the other people. They gave because of the vision you put forward.
Right.
They don't know how to do that kind of vision. And so I'm thinking, I was blessed. My vice chair and I went to lunch 10 years ago, and we talked about how do we handle the troubled waters? How do we handle it? What do we have to do to be ready? And we laid everything out, all the various scenarios, all the things that had to happen.
And you trusted that relationship.
Oh, yes.
So
in New Psalmist, the phrase I use is we do life together. I had known him since before he was married. I know his children are like my children. I knew him when he dated his wife, who was a member of New Psalmist, and he was going to another church. I remember when he got his first main job. So I've known these folk for years.
Right.
We have mutual respect. I respect what they bring to the table. They respect what I bring to the table.
Right.
I didn't want the last memory of New Psalmist. The last memory New Psalmist had of me to be me dead. I did not want that under any circ. I lived under the threat of that before I retired. I do not want them to come in this building on a Sunday morning after my funeral and not have a pastor. And when Pastor Thomas Jr. got called to the church and got installed, I breathed the deepest sigh of relief ever. Because now they have a pastor.
Right.
Just like parents don't want to die and leave their mate,
just wandering.
For herself.
Yeah, in the wilderness. Yeah.
I didn't want to do that to the church. Secondly, I love the church more than I love what I do at the church. That's another part of the troubled waters. The troubled waters is what's going to happen to me. What's going to happen to me is secondary to what's going to happen to the church.
Right.
God called me to take care of his church, to be the under shepherd of his church. He didn't call me to worry about me. He said he'd take care of me.
Right.
And so I had to make New Psalmist my prime concern. I wanted to leave at 68, but forces came that made it so it couldn't happen. I couldn't leave during COVID.
Right.
I could have left, but I kept the passengers feeling safe. But after COVID was over, I knew it was over. And I knew that I didn't have the capacity I had before. I couldn't step in the same river twice. New Psalmist had its golden era under me. The operative word was had.
Yeah.
I couldn't go back and recreate that. I was 73 then. I was 40. I was 38 and 40 then.
Yeah.
I couldn't go back and do that again. I couldn't call young people to Christ. I contend, if you intend to keep pastoring and you turn gray and get a beard, shave them off. But when you decide, I'm going to retire, let them grow. Why? Because young people ain't joining gray hair.
Yeah.
They're just not doing it. They want to join somebody who's doing life with them. Now, at New Psalmist, I teach Bible class for the young adults. I'm going to have 50 to 70 of them out every other week. They come into Bible class. Pastor Wendell Mapson Jr. is going to have 10 to 15 join every Sunday. When I preach on Sunday at New Psalmist, I do not open the door to church. I may say the door of the church is open and say, Pastor, it's in your hands. Because they're not going to join under me. They see me as somebody who's already arrived. They want to join somebody who's on the journey with them. The only people I'm on the journey with are folk who are 80, 70, 75.
Yeah. The church ages with you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The young people come to my Bible class because I have arrived. And they want to know, how'd you do it? What were the things you did? But they want to join for membership somebody who's journeying with them, who's going to bring into the journey the kind of stuff that they want to see happen. The stuff I was bringing in when I was 38, when I was 39, when I was 40, up to about 50 and 60 or something. But now, wow. And so that helped me to realize now on and the best metaphor I can give you for that, I knew I was going to get off the bus and the bus was going to keep on going.
Yeah.
That was and I think that for many people is tough. But
that's what you want, though.
And at the same time, you have to contextualize it.
Yeah.
Remember, life is story. You end this chapter, another one's beginning. I kept saying to myself, because I never got depressed during the process, because of certain things I told myself. One was this: I can't believe God spent all this energy on a marvelous appetizer, on a tremendous main course, to flunk on dessert. Dessert is over there on the table. I just got to go over there and find out which one I want.
Yeah.
But it's there. That kept me from, what am I going to do?
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't want to just do nothing. And see, I don't say stuff like that. I don't want to do nothing. It's not a case of doing nothing or something. It's about having different choices.
Right.
I got a whole new set of choices now. And I live with them set of choices. The emotional response we give ourselves is not for the moment. Like if people talk about, I'm anxious about what I'm going to have, how I'm going to handle this. Let me give you an example. The body goes through certain sensations when you're nervous, upset, or whatever. Have you ever had moments when you felt like your stomach was in knots? You know, your hands, you're doing like this, wringing your hands. You feel like your heart is beating fast. You feel cold or hot. Now, if the context of that is you're about to go into the loan officer's office and sign the documents that you have been working hard to get, and excited about so you can build a house, build a church, get a car, whatever. What are the emotions that you're really feeling? Tell me the emotions you would say you're feeling. If all of that's going on in your body and you know you about to walk in there and this man, or no, say it's not alone. You're going to walk in that room and sign a document and they're going to give you $100,000 cash, no strings attached. What are the emotions you're feeling?
I'm tense.
All of
Inside
the
all of that and fearful.
Okay, but now take the same context. Take the same body emotions. You're about to go into the doctor's office and he's going to read you the report from the oncologist about the tumors that they have found in your body. What's the emotions you're feeling?
That I might die.
Okay. All the negative emotions are coming in your mind, right?
Yeah.
Now remember this, it's the same body experiences.
Yeah.
What's different? The context.
Context, yeah.
What the latest studies are showing is that our emotions are not triggers of the past. They are a predictor of how we think the future is going to be. They tell us what we think we're going to live into. So that's why I gave you the two different scenarios.
Yeah.
The one, you're going to get all this money and whatever. Your body feeling the same way. It's saying the same thing, but it's a different context.
Mm-hmm.
You go into the next context, the same chemicals in your body are doing what they're doing, but it's based on that context. And what do you feel? Intense, nervous, anxious. And what is anxiety? Fear of the future, that my future is going to be terrible. I'm not going to be able to make it. I'm going to die in 6 months, this and that. And that.
Yeah.
So I made sure I constantly went to work on my context. Through these last 18 months, I went to work on my context. So I never got into that negative context. They're going to hate me or this not going to work out. And I never went there.
Mm-hmm.
I never went there. Every time I would say, no, God didn't do all this time on the appetizer and the main course and gonna flunk on dessert. I'm kind of excited to see what's beyond the rim.
Mm-hmm.
What's gonna be on the other side of this? Because I know our great gospel song that's sung out of the negative but sung with triumphalism. I don't believe he brought me this far.
Yeah.
To leave me now. When we were young, we sang that with, that's what carried us through. And now that we're older, got all these new CCM songs and all this other stuff that we sang, that song still work.
Yes.
So for me, this whole sense of retirement was a recognition that all I'm called to do is move the needle. And somebody said, well, what's going to happen? What about if this don't work? And I'm only called to do it in my time. I can't predict the future.
That's true.
The future don't belong to me.
Yeah.
I just did my part when I was on the stage.
Yeah.
And so I approached this with a sense of awe, wonder, and thankfulness that I'm able to be reasonably healthy. And I would say to anybody, you got to recognize when the time is coming. My wife had surgery in the season when I wanted to be retired. I had wanted to be retired 4 years earlier than her surgery. Her surgery compounded or left her with some mobility issues, which makes some of our traveling and whatever difficult. If I had retired earlier, there's some things we would have been able to do that are more difficult and challenging now.
Mm-hmm.
And I think one needs to think of the long sweep of your life. That God has called us to be able to be presented to him at the end of the journey.
Mm.
Not as pastor, but as person.
Mm.
And what God is measuring us by is not what we accomplish, but how we've grown.
Mm-hmm.
How we've grown from where we started to when we close our eyes.
Mm-hmm.
And part of that growth is to recognize when to let something go.
Yeah. We were talking in the car coming over here. about other pastors we know. It, it's about finishing well, and what does that mean to finish well?
What I learned in track and field in high school is what Mr. Holliday used to teach us. You got to kick at the end. If it's a cross-country race, a 100-yard dash or whatever, put on that final kick. Because when you cross the finish line, you don't want to leave nothing. You want to leave it all on the track. So you see runners in that last lap or whatever, turn on that final kick.
Yeah.
Finishing strong is about knowing when to turn on that kick. You can't turn that kick on in the last 10 feet. You got to turn that kick on early enough to get to the end and finish strong. I knew in 2013 the day was coming. And so I started then, putting my plans in place so that the moment would be able to happen. And then as I realized that I was going to go out in 2024, at the end of 2024, 25 for my final moments, I knew I had to conserve for that final kick. And I laid it all. When I announced that I was leaving, I was in the process of starting that kick so that folks saw he still got it. He still got it. Why is he leaving now?
Yeah.
He's at the top of his game. No, he's in the kick.
Yeah.
He is leaving it all on the field now.
Yeah.
He ain't at, no, he know this race is ended. I'd be preaching sermons, and midway the sermon, the Spirit say, "You sure you don't want to end now? You really don't have to go much further because there ain't much left in this tank."
Yeah.
Have you heard the ghost tell you that?
And they know what you can do, so you don't have to do it, right?
Yeah, Doc. You be preaching along, Spirit say, "You can end on point 1. Point 2 can be next week."
Yeah, and in terms of just coming to the end of a chapter and the beginning of another chapter, and how do you in terms of a church selecting a successor? I think that it's partly based on not necessarily calling another me or you as much as it is, what have you seen in me over this journey, the kind of qualities that you would want in a successor? Not me. You're not going to get another me. Maybe, and you shouldn't want another me, but there's hopefully something the kind of pastor I have been in modeling what a shepherd is, that you refuse to call somebody who doesn't have.
Right. There's certain certain components to the soil that shouldn't change. We may plant some different seeds, but the composure or the complexity of the soil should basically stay the same. In the calling of Walter Thomas Jr., the church wasn't really calling Walter Thomas Sr. 2.0.
Right.
Right. If God wanted Walter Thomas Sr. to still pastor, he'd have given me the tools to keep doing it. I did go bald, so that did help. I could shave this off, and I did do that with regularity. But the other skills necessary, I had made, how do I say, there's certain accounts in us that are not interest-bearing. We only make withdrawals from. One is, I think, the pastoral account of managing all of the stuff that goes on. We don't gain interest on that account. We just make withdrawals, all the fires you got to put out. all of the fights you got to quiet down, all of the disagreements that rise up, all of the financialisms that seem to bust up. Those are just withdrawals. There are no deposits made into that. And over the years, the account gets low.
Mm-hmm.
And you realize, I just don't have it anymore for this.
Yeah.
And you realize that once you make overdrafts, people don't know what they're going to get.
Mm-hmm.
They get you on the wrong day when your account is absolutely gone, coming in to fuss about something and complain about something. They may meet a you they have never met before. You see where I'm coming from?
Yeah, I do.
And that's when you know it's time for me to be packing up. There's not enough left here to make withdrawals on. I can't keep doing this. I can't keep finding the statement that releases the tension for everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'm about to tell you what I really think. So I think there comes a moment when we're looking at who's going to succeed somebody. You have to think about, what does the church need now?
Yeah.
I knew the church didn't need another me.
Yeah.
They did not need another me. I didn't understand that, but I knew that. I didn't know America was going to elect Donald Trump.
Mm-hmm.
But having elected Donald Trump, I know they need Walter Jr.
Right. Right.
I am more of a tacticianer, a tacticianer. Well, I guess that's the word. Or I am one who is going to see a big picture and look for a path. So is Walter. He is a feeling person. So am I. I'm a person who wants to order reality, my reality that I'm in. I'm going to structure it. Walter is one who is going to keep looking at what the reality is presenting him and seeing things that I would not see. He's going to have levels of compassion that just are not native to me.
Yeah.
But they're native to him.
Yeah.
And it's happening at a time when people in Baltimore being laid off, being fired. They go to work on Monday, making $130,000 a year, and get a letter saying you got to decide by Wednesday whether you want to take an early retirement, whether you want to take your chances with keeping your job, or be fired.
Yeah.
And those are the realities swirling in the world now, in America now, in Baltimore now, in New Psalmist communities now. And I think they've called somebody who's sensitive to the pain of members.
Yeah. And that's exactly what I was getting to. The profile of the contemporary pastor, a Walter Jr., who is not a Walter Sr., for what he's equipped for his hour and for this hour in America and for his generation.
That is so true. And I guess part of what our responsibility is as senior pastors is to help some of those who seek the pastoral ministry before they get it understand what it really is. It is leading people to the house of God, to God's eternal kingdom, by way of earth's temporal hell. And if you think that all you called to do is to preach to them and grow this metropolis of a church, you miss it.
Yeah. Take this sentence that I used Sunday and respond to it. The post-COVID church cannot do church with a pre-COVID mindset.
Oh, yeah. You know, the line, I think it was Albert Schweitzer or somebody who said, no, Einstein said, The tools we use to get us where we are aren't the tools that will take us where we need to go. There's a whole new mindset. COVID changed a lot.
Yes, it did.
COVID changed a lot. And so many churches are still locked in pre-COVID. And here's the great side of it. A lot of our people are still online. Yeah, that's a great line here. A lot of our people are still online. No, online was online before COVID. Some of our churches just got online. But people had hundreds of thousands, pastors had hundreds of thousands of worshipers online before COVID. But the folk we're talking about now, yeah, a lot of my people are online. No, they ain't online. Your people ain't online. No, they just ain't coming to church. Yeah. The reality of it is, we got to go after the folk who still lost. I know when we came back from COVID, I didn't spend any energy on trying to bring people back who were still online.
Right.
I'd spent 2 years telling them it was okay to be online. And now all of a sudden I'm going to tell them, no, you got to be here. No, I went after folk who didn't go to church. And that's where New Psalmist has been still flooding. And when Pastor told me, but I found out this morning, Fergus told me 500 people have joined in the last 8 months, because he's going after folk who aren't members of anybody's church. He baptized 54 this past Sunday and going back and baptized 85 this past Sunday and got 54 to baptize next month. That blew my mind. What we did before won't take us where we got to go. When we came back from COVID, we didn't baptize every month no more. We only baptized on special days. And we baptized in the Sunday morning service. Right in the middle of the service, we put baptismal pools up. Right in the middle of the sanctuary. And we baptized in the service. But we only did it 4 times a year.
Right.
But that's let people realize what baptism is and whatever. And folks start coming, and now we almost baptizing every month. Because we went after folk who didn't know the Lord. There is a new mindset in the land. And what we don't, another thing we've got to consider is we're not going after us. When you went to Elizabeth, New Jersey, how old were you?
23.
I went to New Psalmist, I was 25. Everybody was older than us. There were 5 or 6 generations above. There were people 70 years old sitting out there listening to us.
Yeah.
Now we are the 70 and 80-year-olds. And they're 12-year-olds and 13-year-olds listening to us. When I went to New Psalmist, everybody was older than me. When I left, there were 5 generations under me. Gen X, Millennials, Gen Z, Gen Alpha, and Gen Beta are all under me. They're all under me. For me to think that Gen Z thinks like me is an arrogant presumption.
Yeah.
The church has to now start asking the question, where are the minds of people?
Right.
And for that reason, we have to look to folk. Gardner Taylor, the Lyman Beecher lectures. You sent me the tapes. What did he say of Ezekiel? He is a man of their own coast.
Yeah.
What the church has to be doing now.
The whole point is I was sending you tapes too.
Doctor, Lord, and we all sat and listened and called each other. Oh, God.
Tapes.
Cassette tapes, doctor, and reel-to-reel tapes. But he was a man of their own coast.
Yes.
This is for what we are dealing with in the broader sense of a change of philosophy. We aren't in the postmodern, we are not in the modern era anymore.
Right.
We're in the postmodern era.
Postmodern.
Postmodernity thinks really, we're in the pre-Christian era. We're living in an era to which Jesus came, not left. Because folks don't know he even been here. But it's modernity is gone. And postmodernity, which started in the second half of the 20th century, has come of age. It is no longer the idea that folk are trying to figure out. Postmodernity, for example, postmodernity and development of consciousness. Level 4 personality consciousness says that, say, me and my wife are having an argument, then I learned to start saying, I should consider what she says. I'm still holding on to my position and whatever, but I can now listen and consider what she says. That's modernity, where the focus of everything is solid in the one idea that I hold is true. And so so this is true. Postmodernity says, I listen to what she says, she listens to what I says, and I begin to start saying, I may need to adjust what I think by what she's saying. And she may need to adjust what she's thinking by what I'm saying. The absolute truth isn't in my idea, where I just have to accept I just have to learn how to hear what she's saying.
Yeah.
That's modernity. Postmodernity says, no, I need to incorporate her into me. That's how these young people think. That's why there's no meta-narrative or meta-truth. You hear lines like, I got to live my truth.
Yeah.
But people from our era don't even know what that means. Yeah. I hear people talking about they got to live their truth. I can't stand that. Well, you don't even know what they're saying.
Yeah.
And for that reason, the stuff we used back then, we understood. We understood the music of the age, the philosophy of the age. We read Franz Fanon. We read Eldridge Cleaver. We knew Martin King. We understood all of the great writers and whatever. In that context, these people got a whole new set of stuff.
Yeah.
And so we need the people. We need a man of their own coast, or woman of their own coast, who is not at the top of the generational pyramid, who speaks another language, who is an immigrant in all of these cultures and not a native. Makes sense?
It makes a lot of sense. It makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Well, I tell you, we started talking at the train station when you came to the car, and
we'll keep talking at lunch.
And I'm glad I had my GPS to get me.
Oh yeah,
here.
Oh yes, we would not be here. This podcast would not be taking place.
We would cross the Ben Franklin Bridge.
We'd be walking in a Drexel lab talking about, are we here?
But this has been a great conversation, and thank you, my friend, my dear friend and brother, for coming and for being on this podcast. On this podcast, you've been very helpful. If today's conversation added value to your ministerial journey, then I'll be sure to subscribe to the Ministry Exchange so you never miss an episode. And stay tuned and connected with us on social media, Ministry Forward, or at Ministry Forward, for more tools and insights and encouragement between episodes. Thank you for being a part of the Ministry Exchange. Until next time, keep leading and encouraging and serving with purpose, and above all, keep the faith. And again, to my dear friend, Bishop Walter Scott Thomas. Thank you for being.
Thank you, Jesse. This is an honor to be able to sit down with you in a forum where we get to share not just the length and breadth of the experiences we've had over the years, but we get to share how some of those experiences have shaped us.
Yes.
And helped us be who we are. and stay the friends that we've always been.
Always been.
As we still keep trying to make it. Now, what car you driving now? I got to figure out so I can go home and, copy and get one like yours,
Well, it's
Doc, I remember when I got my Park Avenue, I knew I had arrived.
yeah, that Park Avenue, man. Yep.
That was the last word.
It was the last word. It was